welcome. I thought I was going to stick to a very specific schedule for these, and pretty quickly that did not work. I was going to do this at 10:30 a.m. every day, Pacific time, U.S. Pacific time. I planned to do it at 10:30, and then what was I doing at 10:30? I was looking for a coupon for emergency water storage, and the morning got away from me. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about some news items that came across my feeds that I thought were interesting. I'm now trying to find more things from more places, and that's really resulting in more garbage. But finding the really good stuff in there is a little challenge. It's just something I'm still working through. But let's see what we got. Looks like we got a couple people in here. As usual, I will, as soon as this is done, I will put the recording, a higher quality recording in the, there I go with a thumbs up, a higher quality recording in the, I'll post it to YouTube a little bit later on. If you can hear me, please let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat, and then that way I can make sure everything's all good to go. Yep, I see lights showing up, so it should be, but I have no sound on this computer. I gotta fix that. All right, well, I'll just go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at the first item. How can I do this? Share screen, this guy. So this was the first one. I thought this was really interesting. There's a tutorial that was just made available on Hugging Face's website. LeRobot tutorial, and it looks really cool. Looks really interesting. It kind of reminds me of, there was a kind of a tutorial available using on AWS, or produced by AWS, but it was a remote control car that you would program, but it required buying this car. You could do it all in software as well, but you had to buy this car, and basically it was a vision model looking at the track and looking at where the lines are on the track, and then you building a model, or you building some logic that would decide how to stay on that track, and basically it became a race around the track, different autonomous vehicles competing on this race. But this one looks a whole lot more accessible. It still requires some 3D printing apparently, and let's see, can I move that? No. It requires some 3D printing. It requires some other stuff, and so there is actually another version of it coming soon, I think, that will also not require 3D printing and cost $150 max, and that's coming soon. So this was something that was announced yesterday. Looks pretty cool. And I think I need to. I'm looking for. I'm always looking forward to what are the tools I'm going to be able to start using with my daughter as she starts to get to the age where she can learn more about electronics, about robotics, about programming, and not quite there yet, but getting very close. And I'm excited about what we can do together. It's not quite at the point, like even doing Lego is hard. The idea of following a set of instructions. The Lego instructions are amazingly easy. They're like if IKEA did Lego, they're just so easy to follow, and easily digestible. But she's still at a point where it only wants to do like random blocks, putting them together and creating a structure, rather than anything recognizable. But hopefully we'll have that soon to play with. Let's go to, okay, cool. My share went away. That's weird. So here is another interesting, what is this thing? I don't want this video. So Meta's Self-Taught Evaluator enables LLMs to create their own training data. I've seen a few other examples of tools available. Oh, I haven't actually shared, have I? Shared. I've seen some other tools available for trying to create the training data for when doing fine-tuning, fine-tuning of a model. And so this is another one. Self-taught evaluator using the idea of LLM as a judge. Now, if you click on this link to this LLM as a judge, it's from a few months ago, just a really short time ago, and they were suggesting, well, the first model that really allowed for this, about using the model as the judge or the evaluator, was really ChatGPT 4.0. But this article talks about the self-taught evaluator, and it's using Llama 3.1, or it's using Llama 3 70 billion instruct model, and they found that using the reward benchmark, increasing it from 75 to 88% after 5 iterations without human annotation. So it definitely looks like an interesting thing to play around with, see how it can help make it a little bit easier a little easier, because if anytime you require humans to be in the loop, it's going to make things harder, more expensive, slower, and a model potentially can do that role faster and better. Better? I don't know, but it's going in the right track, going in the right direction, I guess. So let's see. Let's move on. This one's probably going to be a short video, the short stream. So. In the last couple of streams I've done about this AI news, we've seen a number of attempts at regulation, or just the discussion of regulation in different jurisdictions. And here's an article from The Economist. Economist. AI needs regulation, but what kind and how much? And this was pretty interesting, looking at how regulation is done in different places around the world, and why do we need it? And one thing I thought was interesting is that people have noticed that people have been trained by Hollywood from childhood to fear artificial intelligence, mostly because of the Terminator films, with the idea that the Terminator robot in the future will try to destroy the human creators. And I guess the same idea is in Battlestar Galactica and the Cylons. The Cylons don't want to kill all humans, but they're trying to defend themselves and want to have their own world. And all these, things that are great in the movies or on TV, but are they actually going to be true? And there's definitely a lot of these AI doomers definitely a lot of folks that are saying, they're going to kill us all. But maybe the real threat isn't so much on the AI is going to kill us. I guess Battlestar Galactica talked about, wanting to just coexist, much like the creator. The movie, was it last year? Incredible film about the robots just wanting to live, and not wanting to. They'll defend themselves, but not wanting to kill all the humans. So that was. But maybe the focus actually should be on risks that are posed by AI today, such as bias, discrimination, AI-generated disinformation, and violation of intellectual property rights. And we're definitely seeing, court cases going to court. Just I think there was one today or yesterday that the case against tools like Midjourney can go ahead because they are the argument is that they are using artists' data, artists' images to train the model. And is that okay because the artist didn't give permission? Then again, the artist posted it online and wants everybody to see it. Well, everybody except certain people or certain applications. And if you wanted to limit who sees your art, I feel like you should have done that ahead of time, maybe a paywall or something else, if you're limiting who gets to view your data. Either give it, you're putting it available, or have some sort of policy in place that lets people know what are they allowed to do with your but that's kind of sketchy when it's available for that's part of what's in that court case. But then it talks about what are the regulations that are in place. And so this is a really pretty interesting article. So at one end of the spectrum are countries which rely mostly on self-regulation, including the Gulf states, Britain, and the leader of this pack is the U.S. Members of Congress talk about AI risks, but no laws forthcoming. And the U.S.'s most important legal directive was the executive order on AI from last year. China's government, taking a much tougher approach, has proposed several sets of rules, less about protecting humanity or to shield Chinese citizens and companies, and more about controlling the flow of information. And then Europe is somewhere in the middle. In May, they passed the world's first comprehensive legislation, the AI Act, which came into force on August 1st. But the law is mostly a product safety document, which regulates applications of the technology according to how risky they are. AI-powered writing assistant needs no regulation, for instance, whereas a service that assists radiologists does. And actually, another place where this comes up in EU is just based on previous laws that have been passed. I saw pretty recently there was a journalist who had written about stuff that was going on in a court case or a bunch of court cases. Now, I didn't read the details. I'm not sure if it was in a model or some sort of RAG solution that was generating content kind of on the fly. But let's just say the AI interpreted that this journalist was like a pedophile and a bunch of other things that he was writing about, not that, and the AI, whatever that is, was thinking it was him, not things that he was writing about, other people he was writing about. And so now, does the AI, is that part of the model? This information about this journalist being the type of person that he's writing about rather than, and so if it does think that, does it qualify for GDPR where he's, the right to have accurate information posted about you online and the right to remove that information? And how does GDPR fit into training a model based on and having like personal information in that model when that information is wrong? And often, you do any sort of, I'm sure we've all asked like a ChatGPT or a Claude or, whatever, asked about us, about, whoever you are, who is Matt Williams of Technoevangelist? And it comes up with stuff that was just completely made up. Are those hallucinations when they're wrong? Do they qualify for that GDPR? Because there's nothing about me and that I hadn't thought about that. So that's interesting. Let's see. 3 separate efforts are underway to devise global rules, and many views on what that looks like. OpenAI, startup behind ChatGPT, says it wants something like the International Atomic Energy Agency to monitor risks. Microsoft prefers a less imposing body modeled on the International Civil Aviation Organization, which sets rules for aviation, and academic researchers argue for an AI equivalent of the European Organization for Nuclear Research, or CERN. So just interesting stuff there. And in the US, because of the lack of a law in place other than this executive order, there's concern that if Donald Trump comes into office, then he'll blow away that executive order, in which case the states need to make sure there's something in place ahead of time. And some of those ideas include having a kill switch in the system that lets the humans always take over to avoid the Terminator situation that, overactive imaginations. Anyway, so that was interesting. Then, regarding, I think I mentioned, in that article about, one of the risks being generated misinformation. And here we got an example of that. I think, was it yesterday or the day before, we showed that there were images generated that showed Swifties for Trump or something like that. Share screen. Could that endorsement, AI-generated Taylor Swift endorsement, be illegal? There's new legislation in place called, what was it, Evil? No, Elvis, not Evil. Elvis Act in Tennessee. And there was another one, I think, about misrepresentation, and does this kind of fit into that? And there's other laws that have been passed in different places. Does this fit here? Is this political use of this of these people, of these celebrities, does that take effect here? Shark Tank has had to. Oh, my mouse seems to have died. Huh, that's weird. Okay, well, that's an odd time to die. Let's see, can I just use my keyboard? So is this potentially illegal? I gotta fix this. Hold on, let's see. Let's plug this guy in to out of ports. Oh man, this is. Oh, I got this thing. Let's see. Okay, that's plugged in. There we go. Connected. There we go. Perfect. What else was interesting in here? Yeah, so just an interesting connection of, are these, using fake endorsements, does that mean this is illegal? Is this something that should be pursued? One more thing that looked interesting is a survey. I got to come up with a better solution around sharing and unsharing these. All right. So, survey from GitHub. Is it from GitHub or from Microsoft Parent? I think it's specifically from GitHub, talking about AI tools, AI and software development. So we saw in the Stack Overflow survey for developers that came out a few months ago. We covered it on the stream that I do with Ryan, from a friend and former coworker, that actually we're going to be doing the next stream in about an hour. So we talked about the Stack Overflow survey. I feel like two times ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and so yeah, we we covered that. This one looks at it in asking AI specific questions. So that Stack Overflow survey had AI as a portion of what was being asked, but it seems like this was specifically around AI tools. Um, and 97% of respondents reported having used AI coding tools at work at some point. So definitely a different kind of group than what was being, the type of people that were being talked to in the Australia survey from yesterday, where it was a small portion of people that had any experience with AI. And that Australia survey was definitely not for developers. This one is for developers looking at AI tools. And there's just all sorts of interesting things in here. I'd like to spend a little bit more time going through this, but they mostly focused on Brazil, Germany, India, and the U.S. And it just pulls out how do people think in each of those countries about using AI coding tools at work, how companies are approaching the use of coding tools, and all sorts of other things. It's some good, some pretty charts. And I feel like as I went through this with the Stack Overflow, survey, it felt like there were a lot of doing surveys is really hard. I remember when I was at Microsoft, coming up with questions for survey, because we did a few of those when I was in the education marketing group, and coming up with the right question that is specific enough without and you're always without being too leading is really challenging. And I remember it being very difficult, and I'm glad that there were people that are dedicated to it, and I'm glad I'm not one of those people, because it's hard. It's kind of like doing certification for coming up with questions for certifications. When I was at Datadog, I started up the training group at Datadog, and in fact, my wife just reminded me I was just building all the infrastructure and the back end for our training, kind of to host training, and because I had done the first few courses, I created the first couple of courses, and then I built out this platform to run all the training from, and I was trying to finish it up just as we got the call saying, hey, there's this baby we think that the mother would like you to be the parents of. And so we went to the hospital, met our child for the first time because we adopted our daughter, and then we came home. But within a few days, I had to go back to work to finish off the platform for the training. Anyway, I don't know why I'm going into that detail, but that's what you get with me. You get tangents. But fast forward a number of years, and that training team had grown. I don't know what it is at now, but I think it's 10 people probably in training. And one of those guys, or one of those folks in the training team, Tamer, kind of spearheaded the certification effort. And he had to go into so much detail about getting questions that are specific enough but not too leading. And there's really only a couple of vendors you can go with, and you think, why are these? I mean, these two vendors are both pain to work with. Why aren't there more? Because doing this job sucks. And coming up with the right questions is really, really hard. And the same thing is true with surveys. Coming up with good questions is really hard. And I feel like the Stack Overflow, they had a lot of really bad questions, and some of the answers, they would be open ended, and people could type in, and there would be all sorts of answers that were basically the same answer but with different words, and so they were comparing these different answers that were really the same thing, probably, but it was vague enough, and you didn't really. It's hard. But here in this survey, it looks like they've done a really good job. Microsoft has had a lot of experience doing these types of things, and so they probably involve the right people, which is great. There's a long way of getting to that point. But anyway, it's super interesting. Lot of good stuff in this survey. I'm not sure if this is all of the things or just kind of a summary of. I guess just a summary. I wonder if there's the actual. Oh, here's the methodology behind the report. And probably the actual report. Oh yeah, it looks like a good. Oh no, this is just methodology. I wonder where the full document is. Okay. Conducted online by Wakefield Research. So somebody else did the actual survey because that job sucks. I wonder if they have a link to the. Okay, there's the last year's report. Anyway, it's in here somewhere. I'm sure it is. And I think that's the last of the news items I thought was really interesting this week. So let's go into some comments. I see there's a couple of comments. It's a lot of court cases, Matt. Yeah, there are a bunch of court cases, but there's one that just went through to the judge saying, yes, there's some merit here. Let's move on to hearing the actual case rather than just throwing it out. These AI models are founded by web scraping, casting wide nets that sometimes bypass robot text file, that sometimes captures sensitive competitive information, and sometimes grabs proprietary data. Sometimes it uses your information that you've provided to the model without disabling because there are opt-out for collecting information. So some of it you have voluntarily given to them, maybe without knowing it, but you have voluntarily given to them. And there's all sorts of other places where they're getting information. And then there's, some of these are using open source data sets that are not obtained in a good way. So does that mean the open source, whoever put together that data set is responsible, or whoever uses the data set is responsible? Even if they know the source of, there are questions, there are answers that we probably can come up with based on how we feel, but then there's the legal. What are they legally? Who's liable? So anyway, that's it. From Joe, nice to see a live of yours. Yes, this is. I do this every day. I think I can safely say that I do this every day because I've done this every day. I think this is the sixth one, but I still suck at coming up with a specific time. I said it was going to be 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, U.S. Pacific time, and it is 1:09 p.m. and we've been gone for about 32 minutes. So I started at 12:35, 37, and so 5 days in, and I still haven't figured out what time I'm going to do it. 10:30 seems like a good time, but tomorrow I don't know what's going to go on. We've got the Lutron, a local vendor who did the Lutron setup in this house. All the lights in this house, like that one, and the blinds in the rooms, and all the blinds in the entire house. And the Lutron system has. I looked at when it synced with Home Assistant. I saw that there's 280 devices that are all in the Lutron Radio Raw 2 setup. Well, it'll be upgraded to have Radio Raw 3 tomorrow. And then we need to change a few LEDs that have burned out in a year. So there's something wrong with the control box that they need to change. And so they're doing that tomorrow. They're coming tomorrow. It's kind of like when you get the notification from UPS or from any service kind of thing. We're going to be there between like 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. and here's the window, and hopefully you're there, and if you're not, it's your problem. Yeah, it's one of those. There's something else going on tomorrow. Our pest control. We have somebody's going to go down into the crawl space, which apparently, so this guy, I don't know why I'm going into all these details. There's this guy that does the pest, and he's told me a few times, like, I hate going down into the crawl spaces often because they're scary, but ours is the best crawl space he's ever seen. So he's going to go into the crawl space, look for mice, see if there's any mice. All right. I think I've done, I guess I'm going through all this stuff, stalling, waiting for any other questions, seeing if there's any questions. Because I got nothing else to talk about. We'll come back, reconvene tomorrow, 10:30-ish, to see if there's any new news in the AI world. I'm looking forward to a new model to come out and maybe play around with models. I've got another video coming out later today about the next video in the free Ollama course. So that one is focused on comparing, like for any given model, comparing different quantizations to see which is best for you. You know, giving you one tool as a framework to use to help compare the answers from different quantizations. Because so on Discord, there are some folks that say, oh, Llama 3.1.4, garbage. I said, well, is there a specific prompt that is garbage? No, it sucks for everything. And I'm finding that Q4 is actually pretty good for a lot of questions that I give it. So I've got about 3 or 4 examples, including function calling and including other reasoning and all sorts of other things. Q4 is doing amazingly well. And in fact, I've got an example where looking at the results from a Q4 Llama 3.1 8B and FP16 and even the Q2, which is magic that works. But Q2, and looking at the answers, I basically had it give me a description of something and fit it into one paragraph. Looking at that one paragraph from each of them, it's hard to tell who created it, which of the models created it. And even switching over to 70B, and I can't do 70B FP16 because my Mac won't handle it. But looking at any one of those, if you pulled any one of those answers and showed it on the screen, you wouldn't know whether it was 8B or 70B. You wouldn't know it was 2K or Q2, Q4, or FP16. They're essentially equal. In some of the experiments I was doing, basically with these, I'm asking the same question 5 times to ensure that I see roughly how often does it in a good answer. And really, I should be comparing like 10 times. And I saw that for some things, like for, what was it, function calling? Or, it wasn't function calling. It was some sort of math thing. And the Q2 model was actually far better than even the FP16 in one example. So that's pretty interesting. So that'll come out later today. There's still a bit of work I need to do on that one. So that'll come out. And then for Thursday, I've got one that goes through all the parameters that you can set on a model. So all the mirror-stat parameters, as well as the temperature, num context. What else is there? Min P, max P, and top K, not min K. Top K, top P, MinP. There's a few others. Basically, that list that's in the docs, and then you go to model file and then parameters. There's a list of all the parameters that are there, and so I just basically go through all that. Okay, I'm killing time waiting for somebody to ask another question. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I guess that means it must be time to go. Okay, come on. Yeah, this is like that time I posted a video about this actually, because I said it on a live stream and then I pulled that out and made a video out of it about when I shared a door frame with Bill Gates, and I just tried to come up with something magical to say, and I didn't. So I'm assuming this is the same thing, and I am taking the place of Bill Gates, and you are trying to think of something to say and not coming up with anything. Sure, I can be Bill Gates. We're like that. We're tight. Whatever the right term is. We're close. Okay, well, no questions. That means I'm going away. Thanks so much for being here. I had a great time. We got it down to 30-ish minutes, 39 minutes it shows, and covered some interesting topics. You know, again, I'm sure we're going to see more news in the next few days about, it seems like AI, how the government thinks about AI seems to be a constant. How the courts see AI seems to be a constant, and that's going to happen more and more. Stupid things that people do with AI. What else is there? Yeah, there seems to be some of the same stories over and over again, and I'm sure we'll see some of that tomorrow. Okay, bye. Thanks for being here. Have fun. Have a good day.